Hey there guys, how's it going? Back with another video. So, let's talk about this upcoming heavyweight pay-per-view extravaganza between Chris Arreola and Andy Ruiz Jr. Andy Ruiz, of course, lost his last fight to Anthony Joshua on the back end of 2019. And yeah, that was the fight where he lost his world titles. And he's since reinvented himself. He's with a new trainer now, and he's looking in better shape. And this is, of course, his comeback, where we see what he's got left, and we see whether or not he can be a major player again in the division. And as far as the heavyweight division goes at the moment, I'm getting kind of tired of the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury bickering back and forth, and all the false updates and all the offers that are supposedly made, and oh, now it's signed, now it is, and I'm just getting sick and tired of the hype. I'm getting bored of it, and as far as that fight goes, just wake me up when the two guys are in the ring. That's all I have to say. As far as this fight goes, Andy Ruiz and Chris Arreola actually do have a lot in common. These guys are actually very similar. On the one hand, I mean, the obvious thing is that they're both Mexican Americans. They both have kind of a similar fighting style. They both come forward, pressure fighters. Both guys are pretty out of shape and have been their entire careers. You know, a lot of body fat on them. And even though both guys are out of shape, at least at face value they do have some ability. Like, they've both got quick hands and they've both got good chins. They can go 12 rounds. They're quite durable. So, yeah, both guys have a lot of similarities, but obviously at the same time, both guys have some major differences. Obviously, the main difference between the two, and what really sets them apart, in my opinion, is, of course, that they're at very different stages of their careers. Chris Arreola has been on the verge of retirement for a long time. I'd say for the past 4 or 5 years he's been on the verge of retirement, and he's been considered retired on and off again during that time. Whereas Andy Ruiz Jr. is pretty much at his prime still. Okay, the guy's very young still. He's still very fresh. Hasn't really taken a beating in his career. You know, his 2 defeats to Joseph Parker and Anthony Joshua were both technical boxing matches, which he just lost on points. But neither one of those fights he really took a lot of punishment, and he's still relatively fresh, is the point I'm trying to make. And of course, after losing his last fight to Joshua at the back end of 2019, Andy Ruiz is kind of trying to reinvent himself now. He's got a new trainer, he's looking in better shape, and like I said before, you know, he's really trying to become a major player again in the heavyweight division, and this is kind of his showcase fight, essentially, where, you know, he just wants to prove he's back at that level. And yeah, that's what really sets these two apart, because Chris Arreola is at a stage of his career now where he could really just get old overnight, because he's had so many layoffs and so many setbacks. And his last fight against Adam Kownacki, he actually did put up a decent fight, but he lost pretty clearly on points, but it was a pretty spirited effort from him. Adam Kownacki is I suppose in some ways similar to Andy Ruiz. He's obviously not as good as Andy Ruiz. He's not as durable, doesn't have as good a chin. But, you know, he's kind of a come-forward pressure fighter with good stamina and good work rate. So there's a few similarities there, but very different fighter in terms of his attributes. So I don't really know how much we can take from that. And that fight was a while ago now, and I don't know if Chris Arreola has been in the gym and has been training since that fight. So I'm going to assume that Arreola isn't going to be in very good shape, and I'm going to assume that Arreola is really just there for the payday. To me, Arreola was at his prime a long time ago. He was at his prime around about 2009, 2010, so around about the time that he fought Vitaly Klitschko, and of course that was his first title shot, and he was an undefeated contender back then, and had a bit of hype going into that fight. The fight was in his hometown, I believe, so his people really thought that he had a good chance of winning the title, but he actually got absolutely demolished by Vitaly, and that was one of them fights that was a real mental beatdown. I know people use that term a lot. A lot of people like to say, oh, this fight was a mental beatdown, you know, he mentally broke him, but a lot of the time I think people use that term loosely, they exaggerate with it, but that fight genuinely was a mental beatdown. Like, Vitaly absolutely played and humiliated Chris Arreola. He played with him for the entirety of that fight, absolutely obliterated him. In fact, I would say that was one of the most one-sided heavyweight title fights I think I've ever seen. Just how easy it was for Vitali, just on pure cruise control, to just dominate every second of that fight, and he truly did mentally break Chris Arreola. I mean, he beat him so bad that Chris Arreola broke down in tears. Like, he famously broke down in tears after that fight, after being made to capitulate by his corner. So, yeah, that was a real mental beatdown. And I think that, in my opinion, ever since that fight, Arreola has just looked lethargic and lackluster, and he blows hot and cold here and there. I mean, he was completely schooled by Thomas Adamek. He also got an absolute battering against Bermane Stiverne, and then had another fight with Bermane Stiverne and got stopped. So Arreola, whenever he stepped up in class, he's always lost. He did have a couple of early knockout wins at a sort of fringe contender / domestic level. For example, he knocked out the likes of Joey Abel, Eric Molina, Seth Mitchell, and several other heavyweight well-known journeymen. He fought the likes of Fred Cassie and got a draw. I thought Fred Cassie won that fight. He also had several fights where he looked really lackluster and went the distance with fighters he was supposed to beat. So to me, Chris Arreola has just been, he's been a fighter who blows hot and cold all through his career, and ever since the Klitschko fight, to me he just hasn't looked the same. And he's going into fight Andy Ruiz now, who we know has a granite chin, who we know, despite not looking in great shape, has pretty good stamina. You know, he's always been able to go 12 rounds if he needs to, and has got deceptively quick hands. That's one thing I will say about Andy Ruiz, is on the inside he can throw quick combinations, and that was what Anthony Joshua figured out, which ended up defeating him, was trying to stand toe-to-toe with someone like Ruiz. Big mistake. You know, if you're going to beat Ruiz, you got to stay away from him and box, same way that Joseph Parker did. So that was what Anthony Joshua figured out, and that's what it would take, in my opinion, for Chris Arreola to win this fight. He would need to keep it long range and just outbox Andy Ruiz for 12 rounds, and I don't think Chris Arreola can do that at this stage of his career. I don't think he can stop Ruiz. Ruiz is too tough and durable. If Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker and fighters like that, who were young, athletic, hungry, motivated, and in their prime, weren't able to stop Andy Ruiz, I can't see a washed up, on his way out of the door, on the verge of retirement, shot to bits Chris Arreola doing it. So I think that Andy Ruiz will break down Chris Arreola. I think he'll just take his time, and he'll just edge forward gradually, and once Arreola starts to tire, and once Arreola starts to capitulate a bit, Ruiz will just break him down. I say he'll stop Chris Arreola from rounds 5 to 9. I think it'll be a mid to late stoppage for Andy Ruiz. I think Arreola in the early rounds might give it a go, kind of like what he did against Adam Konatsky, where he did give it a good go, but I don't think he'll have as much success in this fight, because I think Ruiz is a bit tougher and has quicker hands than Konatsky. So I think it's going to be a systematic beatdown. I think Ruiz is just going to take his time, just jab away and chip away at the older, slower Chris Arreola. And Chris Arreola, depending on how motivated he is, will make it a little bit interesting here and there. And that's what I kind of do like about the fight, is Arreola will, at times let his hands go. He's not just going to stand there and do nothing. He's not just going to lay down in the early rounds. He's going to actually put up a spirited effort. I mean, even when he fought Deontay Wilder and he took that fight at short notice, he still came to fight and let his hands go. It's just that he was completely out of shape because he took it on short notice, and Wilder was just able to, chip away at him and break him down eventually. So I can see Ruiz doing the same thing, maybe not quite as quick, but I think he'll do the same thing. And so I'm going to go with Andy Ruiz by a mid to late stoppage. If Andy Ruiz looks good against Chris Arreola in this pay-per-view extravaganza, I had to say that because, one of the things that has generated controversy about this fight is because they've put it on pay-per-view, and I don't know why this fight's a pay-per-view. It certainly doesn't generate, if you know what I mean. Like, it doesn't generate a lot of excitement. I can't see this being particularly successful on pay-per-view. I mean, I don't think that... I know that, the Mexicans do come out in force to support their guys, and both of these guys are Mexican-American, but I still don't think either guy really has the star power to to warrant a pay-per-view, and this certainly isn't a pay-per-view worthy fight. I think it's a good fight, don't get me wrong, I'll enjoy watching it, but I certainly don't think it's pay-per-view worthy. But whatever, if people want to spend their money, who am I to tell them they can't? So yeah, I think if Ruiz wins this fight, which I expect him to do, and if he looks good, which I also expect him to do because he's with a good, a more experienced trainer now, and he's got a whole team around him. He'll be eating a lot of them Mexican steaks, and yeah, turning his stats up a little bit, if you know what I mean. And I'm expecting him to look good, and if he does, why not stick him in with Deontay Wilder? I hear that there's a rumor that the people behind the scenes here want to make that fight. I would watch that fight. I think that Ruiz would have a very good chance of beating Wilder. I would actually make him the favourite at this stage. So yeah, going with Ruiz by late stoppage. Let me know what you guys think. And thanks for watching, yeah, and stay tuned for more videos. I know that this wasn't really much to talk about, but hey, it's something. Thanks for watching. God bless.